That is one of the worst jobs on any boat restoration project.
Hi, I'm Joe, and welcome to Motor City Boat Werks. Let's get to work.
Today in the Boat Works, I'm starting to work on refinishing the deck for the Skipper 20 sailboat.
All summer, I've been trying to move the restoration of this little sailboat along. I've reached the final project before the boat has to go back in the little works. Paul is a fan of the show, and he recently pointed out to me, while there's a lot of videos about how to paint the hull of a boat, there are actually very few about painting the deck of a boat and the steps that you've got to go through. So this episode is going to be all about my steps for painting the deck on your boat restoration.
On the Skipper 20 sailboat, there's all sorts of gunk, years and years of paint drips, varnish drips, some marine sealant, gobs of who knows what stuck to the deck in various places. All of that's got to be scraped or sanded off. And in particular, we got to pay some attention to the non-skid. Refinishing the deck on a sailboat is a big project. There's no way around it. You've got to get the deck entirely clean. Very similar to how I refinish the wood. Well, the same thing's basically got to happen to the deck of the boat. It's 80%, 90% preparation, and maybe 10% of just getting some paint on there to finish it out.
Just like finishing exterior wood on your boat, the first question you have to ask yourself is it worth taking off all of the fittings, all of the stuff on the deck, to get it down to a bare surface before you start painting? I've said it before and I'll say it again, it's always better to remove everything down to a bare deck, but sometimes you just can't do it. In this case, we've already established this is going to be a budget restoration, so all the fittings are going to stay in place. Once I make my repairs and mask everything off, then I'll begin applying paint to the deck.
This deck is a hot mess. I can already tell this is going to take a couple days just trying to clean this thing up and get it to some state where it might be able to be painted. It can be a little discouraging when you see the amount of work. You don't really know where to start. How do you even begin to tackle something like this? Well, the answer is you got to eat the elephant one piece at a time. Just start in one section, see if you can make a difference, and very soon you'll pick up momentum and kind of work your way around the boat, doing section by section at a time. Before you know it, you'll have it done.
I follow my typical order of work, cleaning the surface really well, making my repairs, then sanding the surface so it has a little bit of teeth so it'll accept the paint, masking all the fittings that I don't want to get painted, and then making my paint application to get the best finish that I can. In the Boat Works, I have an expression, you gotta clean it like you mean it. It's not enough to just wash the boat, you've really gotta make sure that there's no wax or grease on the deck. The surface has to be extremely clean. Sometimes I'll save my final cleaning until after I've done all my repairs and all of my sanding. I'll vacuum and then do a final wipe down with acetone to ensure that the gel coat is particularly clean. It goes without saying that between each of these steps, you're probably gonna have to put the boat away for the night. When you do that, you want to make sure you cover it up. This will save you a lot of time the next day. It'll keep it dry and debris off the boat. You'll be ready to go. Let's talk about repairs.
This is a necessary step. I hate adding extra steps, but all of the refinishing process is all about little steps. Getting them each one right, getting each of the individual steps right is what ultimately makes, the project work out in the end. This is just one of the steps, filling the screw holes and all of the dings on the deck so that we have a really good surface later on when we get ready to paint. So here's the example. Look at these screw holes here. And in this case here, this is a larger hole. Who knows what the heck this was? This is almost a 1/2 inch size hole. And what I like to use is use a piece of blue tape. We put it on the back so it's like backing. And then we'll be able to fill in inside here with the epoxy and get it to stick. This boat has more holes in it. Who the heck knows what was attached here? Any old boat's gonna be like this. This up here is a vent. We got a new vent door aid that goes in here. But we gotta fill all these holes. Why are we doing this? Anytime you cut into the deck of a boat, especially boats that have any type of coring. Coring is wood, could be balsa wood, could be masonite. On these older boats, could be any number of things, right? But usually it's some type of marine plywood or balsa coring. What happens is you've now exposed the wood, right? So if the water gets inside there, the wood will absorb the water, and you'll get damage over time. The wood will rot if it gets wet. So you have to cover the wood, seal it, and the way you do that is you use epoxy or something. Some people don't do this. They will just put sealant in there. I wouldn't rely on the sealant to do that. The sealant's job is to seal the hatch or whatever to the deck so water doesn't get up underneath there. The sealant's job is not to get into the pores of the wood and make it waterproof. That's why you use the epoxy, okay? And you just kind of smear this on here. You can use a brush. You can use popsicle stick, whatever. I should be able to use a palm sander on the flat spots of this boat. I should be able to kind of sand down all of the garbage and get it nice and clean so it's ready to receive some paint. What are we doing today? Today in the Boat Works, I'm working on preparing the deck so that I can begin to make some spot repairs and eventually paint the deck and do the non-skid. This is a very labor-intensive job. It's not really difficult, but it sure does take a lot of effort. There's multiple steps that are involved here, the first of which I showed in another episode, and that was going ahead and beginning to finish the wood on the exterior of the boat. Now we took the wood all the way to the point where it has 2 or 3 base coats on it, and I won't put the final 2 gloss coats on the wood until after the deck is actually done. So at this point, what I'm doing is I'm removing all sorts of rusted, loose, broken fittings that were on this boat from over the years. I'm eventually going to be plugging all these holes. There's all sorts of hardware holes and different sorts of mounting points from decades of different people owning the boat. Well, all those holes that aren't being used, they're going to be plugged back up. The fittings in general we're going to leave in place. Today and the next day, and probably the next day still, will all be nothing but sanding and filling the holes in the deck of the boat using some thickened epoxy from West Systems, sanding some more, and getting everything ready for the painting.
Motor City Boat Werks has no sponsors. I get no compensation from any of the products or the items that I talk about on my channel. Please subscribe and tell a friend. Spread the word about Motor City Boat Werks.
The only good news is that this boat is only 20 feet long. This should be a manageable job. I've done boats much bigger than this, and let me tell you, it was backbreaking. This whole process can be done if your boat is on the water. It's always easier to get the boat in the yard where you can get up on a ladder and get outside the boat, kind of working your way in. Combination of inside the area, outside the area, you can really get it done. When you're on the water, well, it's a lot more difficult because it can be very difficult to get outside the boat looking in to make sure you get all the edges. But the non-skid on the Skipper 20 is particularly aggressive. It was molded that way from the factory. It's in the fiberglass and the gel coat. I don't want to sand that down because I really like it. I think it's going to be quite attractive once it's painted. But there's a lot of junk inside the actual texture in the nooks and crannies, and I got to figure out a way to get all of that out of there.
To get in all these nooks and crannies on the non-skid, well, we're going to use a new tool, and this one is called Mr. Prickly.
Don't hurt hurt me. I'm sensitive.
This is basically a die grinder with a Nylock wheel brush. You can find these on Amazon. They come in different textures and firmness. They're excellent for getting into nooks and crannies.
Now, it's very difficult to get this type of surface clean. It's almost impossible, to get in there and sand all the nooks and crannies. But you definitely can do something to try and get the gunk out of the pores, out of the individual spaces, so that the non-skid surface itself kind of stands proud. In my experience, if you can just get the surface clean, if you can scuff it up a little bit, get rid of the grease and the dirt, you have a very good chance of your paint and non-skid adhering. It's going to wear out over time anyway. That's why you retouch it over time and you choose a product that's easy to repair. What we want to focus on is getting the nooks and crannies clean so that it can receive paint. It's been a lot of work. It's been several long days sanding on the deck of the boat. And I think we pretty much got it to a point where we're ready to mask everything off and we can begin painting. It's taken about 4 days to sand this deck. I kind of did it piece by piece, increment by increment. The flat spots was able to use a palm sander, no problem, but it's all the nooks and crannies and around the wood and the fittings and everything. Well, that's all got to be done by hand. By the 4th day, your fingers and your skin is just pretty much done. This is a project you gotta wear gloves, because if you don't, you'll just tear up your fingernails and the skin eventually will crack and bleed. That is one of the worst jobs on any boat restoration project. Once the deck has been sanded, all the holes are filled, everything's looking pretty good, and I got it just the way that I think I want it, well then it'll come time for some masking. And I'll mask off all of the hardware that's already mounted on the deck. The stanchions, the blocks, the pulleys, all this sort of stuff, all the cleats, everything that's here. We'll go ahead and tape all that off, including the wood again. And then I'll begin working on painting the boat kind of section by section at a time. Some things like the running light right here, we'll be able to unscrew this and take this off and paint behind it. But a lot of the other things are through bolted to the deck. They're sealed to the deck, so we don't want to remove anything. We just want to mask it off. This is probably going to take an hour or two to do. It's all about the details to make sure that you're really kind of covering everything up that you don't want to get paint on. And then, if we're lucky, after that, it'll be time to go ahead and start painting the deck. Doing some painting on the deck of the Skipper 20 sailboat. Today is the first day that I'm painting the deck. We've done all the prep work. We've done all the wood, done everything we got to do, repaired everything, sanded everything, repaired it again, and sanded it again. And now it's time to put on the first coat of paint.
One of the things that will really impact the success of painting your deck is choosing a color that closely matches the gel coat you already have on your boat deck. Experience tells me that the closer you get that paint match, the better your overall finish will be. In fact, most gel coat is not actually white. It's usually off-white or some type of beige color. In a previous episode where I was working on the hatches and the various bits and bobs from the sailboat, I was able to find some Rust-Oleum marine topside paint that very closely matches the gel coat color. It's so close in color, in some cases you can't even tell the surface has been painted. This color is Rust-Oleum marine topside oyster white.
I like this paint. It doesn't have a lot of gloss to it. It's kind of a satin finish when it goes on. It's got good layers. I really like that, and that's what I'm going to be using on the deck here. I like this color because it matches the gel coat really, really well. The nice thing about it is that if you miss a spot, it's almost not noticeable until you're up real close and have really good light. Today we're fighting a little bit of weather. We got to make sure the humidity is right when you do this sort of project, and more importantly, we got to make sure that it doesn't start sprinkling or raining on us while I'm doing this. I'm also fighting bugs. For some reason, there's bugs landing all over my project here. But it's coming out pretty well, and I'm making some slow progress. I just finished parts of the cockpit and around the companionway, and I'm going to be working my way around the side of the boat, and I'll kind of do the rest of the boat leaning over off the ladder to try and get this done. On a bigger boat, you can crawl around and be on the deck yourself, but on something this small, there's just not enough room for a guy my size. The trick when you're doing this non-skid is to right now we're putting down the base coat, right? Because we need to have something for the non-skid to kind of adhere to when we put the color in and everything. But the idea is you want to get in all the nooks and crannies of the non-skid. Go one direction, then go in another direction, go at an angle. Fill in the texture of the non-skid, the original non-skid.
I always recommend 3 coats of paint. You want to make sure each coat dries so that the finish is nice and hard.
Once you've got your coats of paint on the deck, everything's looking good, it's time to get the tape off. Remember, you got to get the tape off of the boat within 7 to 14 days. If you wait any longer, you run the risk of creating a big mess for yourself. The tape will begin to break down, it will shred, and some of the adhesive will stick to the surfaces. You'll have a big mess trying to clean this up. It just makes everything more difficult. So get it off as soon as you can. You can always go back and spot touch up any places that need a little bit more paint. You can always remask and repaint something if it's not quite right. Get that tape off there. Don't let it go longer than 7 to 14 days.
Now, I still want to paint the non-skid and maybe do something with that, but that'll be covered in another episode. I think this episode is a great example of what Motor City Boat Werks is all about. These are complicated and sometimes difficult projects, but if you follow the process and you take your time, you can really get some amazing results. I think now's a good time to revisit Paul's original questions. Can you leave the fittings and the exterior wood on your boat and still get a good finish redoing the deck? Well, there you go, Paul. I think this project is a success. You can judge for yourself. If you're like me, you're probably wondering, what else do I have to do on this little sailboat to get it ready to go sailing? I gotta say, I'm impressed with what I've accomplished so far. I'm approaching about 400 hours working on this boat. You can see the list of what I've accomplished so far. There's 4 more steps before the boat is ready for sea trial. Some of these will have to wait till next spring, but I feel confident this boat is gonna be in the water soon. We've reached the end of the season. The weather is just getting too cold. So now it's time to put the little sailboat back in the little works. Everything's got to be put away for the winter season. And we're going to turn our attention back to the pocket trawler and begin working on the electrical and plumbing systems. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I'll see you next time. Stay motivated. If you like these videos, please hit the subscribe button. These videos would not be possible without your support.